Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. How are you?
I'm okay, Linda. How are you, my sister?
I'm fine, thank you, my brother Kato. It's been a long time since we've been on air together.
Yeah, it has been a hitters kind of break we gave ourselves, but we are back.
Yes,
I'm happy to see you back on screen, Linda.
yes, it's good to see you too. Feels like it's been ages. I want to give you a hug through the screen.
Yeah, I'm giving it to you right away. And to all our viewers, welcome back to our show Call to Activism Africa, and with my co-host, my friend, my comrade, my sister Linda. We shall be taking through talking about unraveling African geopolitics, coups in Francophone and Sahelian countries. But of course, today we are going to be joined by our added host, Brian Kabeko from Kenya, and we shall be starting shortly. But as we wait for our colleague to join us, I want to welcome again my comrade Linda to the show. Hopefully everything is fine with you in South Africa.
Yes, it's very cold, and we've had lots and lots of issues with electricity, which is getting worse. Our situation, as you know, we were without it for most of the previous week. But and that's just how it goes in Africa, I guess. We still have it a lot better here than other countries that don't have much electricity at all. So I'm grateful for that at least. But it is an increasing problem across our continent, as you know, this electricity issue. And we've got all these energy reserves and resources, and yet we're the ones sitting without electricity. So that's been the only problem lately. But that's the
It
least to
is
complain about. The rest of our continent is in a bit of a mess at the moment with all sorts going on. So I shouldn't be complaining about electricity.
It is a shame, Linda, that we have electricity challenges in Africa, yet we have the source of the electricity. I talk about Uganda, we often have challenges with our electricity, yet we have the source of the Nile, where this electricity is being generated and then supplied to other countries such as Kenya and Rwanda, and of course Tanzania from Uganda. But we find that us in Uganda still have power shortages. It's a big crisis in Africa, and I feel for you, Linda, because it has been a persistent challenge on your fingertips in South Africa for the last 3 months. I'm sorry for you, it's not going well with you, but we hope that maybe we shall get a solution at the end of the day. But it's a very tough kind of affair to live a life without reliable electricity, because how do you handle emergencies, especially for hospitals?
Yeah, that's the thing. And with all the elderly people and the babies that are on these life support machines and things, it's not very good. But I'm sure that 2024 it will be sorted out because South Africa are having their elections next year. And you know what it's like when it's an election year. We have lots of foreign journalists coming into the country. We have lots of delegates. We have our corrupt electoral commissions and that coming in. And then, of course, when there's a heavy UN presence and a lot of journalists around, then the government is on its best behavior. You know, they round up all the street people and they keep them in lockup and prison so that it doesn't look like there's a problem on the streets with homeless people. And we should probably have electricity 24/7 then, because they just try and put on a show to the rest of the world that everything is running like a first world country. So next year we know we'll be guaranteed probably of 24/7 electricity, especially in the lead up to elections in the August. So that's just the truth of what it's like living in Africa, I guess.
Yes, Linda. And back to the viewers, of course, we'd like to let them know that we have made 1 year since the inception of this channel called to Activism Africa, and we are glad to have you on the show with us. Linda, what do you talk about our first year as co-hosts on this great show? What are your memories? And
I think it's been an amazing year because there was definitely a need for this, and we've grown so much. I think what has amazed me is the viewership we've had from across Africa. I know that on our African groups, and we're very active behind the scenes. There's a lot of countries that stick together and we work together, and there's a lot of countries that we never hear from. For example, like Sudan and Ethiopia. But yet to find that they are amongst our biggest viewers of the show that was a surprise, that we have such a large following in countries like that. People who don't get involved on any of our groups. And I can think it's only really because of a security issue. These people are living under such oppression in these countries that they can't actively be seen to be involved in groups and that on.
Linda, I can't hear you. I don't know. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you right now. Dennis, can you hear Linda? If you can hear Linda, Dennis, send me a message on our platform. Otherwise,
can Dennis also?
Linda, you are breaking.
Also can't hear. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you in the last 1 minute.
Okay, I'm going to try and sort that out.
I can now hear you. I can now hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear, Linda. Thank you.
I don't know what happened there. Okay. Now, I was saying that the biggest, you were asking what the biggest surprises or unexpected things this last year have been that we've been filming the show. I think it's been our Africa-wide viewership and countries that don't interact with us on the groups or on social media, like Ethiopia and Sudan. We have huge viewership numbers in both countries, but yet we never speak to people in those countries. And I think that it's to do with security issues, with people not wanting to be too visible and involved. Also, a lot of our groups that are safe, we know we've always got moles and people infiltrating the groups who are, pretending to be something, and they're not that, they're not with us. They're against us. So I think people are very, very cautious about joining the groups. So I guess to just say hello to Sudan and Ethiopia and to say hi to them. And of course, our biggest viewership is Nigeria. I think it's because we are both involved with quite a lot of things in Nigeria. We're known there, Kato, especially with the Mubarak Bala case.
Yes.
So we've really got in with the Nigerian groups a lot. And I think as well, because Nigeria is such a huge country, and Nigeria has so many irreligious people. I mean, there's so many people, more and more each day. And I think that that's also why we have such a huge viewership. And then the reach we've had overseas as well with other shows we've been asked to talk on. I've done shows in other African countries like Ghana, and I've also been, we've both spoken in the US, and other shows that we've been invited on. And our guests, we've had Anya, and we've had Todd as well from the US. And it's nice having that interaction with like-minded people, and just comparing all the political issues and the issues that face the world, how similar things are happening around the world. Ours is very much, we relate to what's happening in Africa, but if you look at the bigger picture, you realize that everybody is suffering at the moment. Everyone is suffering around the world with similar things, suppression of speech, and with tighter controls being put on us, with more unrest and violence, and all sorts of crackdowns on like the LGBT communities and things. We know it's getting worse. It helps us feel more connected, I think, globally, as well as across our continent, which I think is wonderful. The unity that we have had as Africans now through channels like this, and the Facebook page, which Dennis is doing a fantastic job of keeping going. So with some fantastic articles and that on it. So I don't know what you found the most surprising.
Yes. Of course, as you have said, having so many hosts, so many guests from different African countries was great for me. Listening
fantastic.
From Sierra Leone, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, of course, Uganda and Kenya and South Africa, and all those different voices across the world, including Anya and Todd and others. It was great having them on the show. And in fact, I have to say I learned a good deal from them, of course.
I did as well.
On the ground, because we are getting live feedback from many of these countries, of course, people in war zones in a way, people in facing insurgencies, people having election violence taking place. We heard from them. Of course, we talked about politics in Africa. We talked about the economy, poverty, and the challenges affecting many people in Africa. And of course, we listen to voices from the NGO sector, people working as human rights defenders. And of course, I know, Linda, you have been able to help quite a number of these people run away from danger. I have to thank you so much. You have been behind the scenes doing a lot of miracles.
Yeah.
Miracles. You're a miracle worker. The way you have been saving people, I have to thank you for that. Of course, in Sierra Leone, from Uganda, the people you are helping in Kakuma, a refugee camp, with the support of that very important person who's helping us do these great things. I'm grateful to you, Linda, and of course to our colleague who's partnering with us to be able to do good better. And of course, Linda, I have to remember that we began with the handling the issue of homosexuality
yes.
in Africa. And of course, we talked about homophobia, and we gave it our best shot at the start, because we began in June, which was a month of pride parades. But of course, there was escalating homophobia in Africa. Of course, we talked about the plight of people in Kakuma camp. We talked about the laws that were pending in several countries, including Uganda and Ghana. And of course, I have to update our viewers that in Uganda, in May, the Anti-Homosexuality Act bill was passed into an act and, of course, signed by the president. So it is a very big challenge to be a homosexual in countries like Uganda, Malawi, Zambia, and, of course, Ghana, and so many others. It's a very big challenge, Linda, and I'm grateful that we talked about it. Of course, we hosted quite a number of people, including gay people, including transgender people facing challenges in Africa. We hosted them on this show, we gave them a platform, and we continue to be assertive and, of course, defend those who are marginalized and can't be able to defend themselves. Linda, what's that? Of course, looking back in terms of our advocacy on human rights.
Sorry, you broke up there, Kato. I didn't hear you, your last sentence.
I broke up. I was saying that, having said all that about our activism, our advocacy on human rights, and I was asking you, what's your take way home from whatever we did in terms of empowering people, in terms of defending rights of others? What can you say about what we did in that direction? And if there are challenges, what should we be doing better going forward?
I think that we've raised a lot of awareness, and I think the most important thing we've done is that we've been able to highlight countries and have people from those countries on the show. So people in other countries have been able to learn exactly what's going on firsthand in countries like Sierra Leone and Nigeria and Uganda, everywhere. And it's helped people to feel not so alone, because they realize that what's happening in their own country, it's not unique to them. And that's helping us to show people that there's a much bigger picture here. And there's what's happening is not isolated per country, it's happening everywhere. It's a planned sort of thing for unrest in Africa and for the domination and takeover of our mineral rights by Western interests. And I think that what you said as well is having so many people that we would never normally have spoken to. We've spoken to, as you say, NGOs, people in the health sector. We've spoken to teachers, university lecturers. We've spoken to journalists. We've spoken to people that, are just from all walks of life. And what has amazed me, speaking to these people and people who are in positions where they are able to get laws changed and put new systems in place, and that is that we have the most amazing people on this continent. When I look at the leadership qualities of so many people of all ages and genders that have come on the show, I have been absolutely fascinated with some of the things that I've learned, like you said as well, and the knowledge that we've gained. And what struck me is that people have plans for a way forward and for a way out of this mess that we're in every sector, from your transport issues and with your roads and all that in Uganda, to prison systems, to the healthcare system, to education. We've discussed it all. And we are speaking to highly intelligent, knowledgeable people who know exactly what's happening in their country, and they know what things can be put into place to remedy that situation. And that's just given me a lot of hope, and it's inspired me a lot, because I just think that despite everything, we've just got these amazing people and everywhere in all our countries that have solutions for a better Africa. But unfortunately, it's due to poor leadership in all our countries that people are not allowed to attain this, which is obviously something that affects us all. And now with what we're talking about today, with everything going on in West Africa, that's very, very crucial and central to everything that's happening in Africa. It's a very important, we are watching a very, very important part of history, African history, unfolding in front of us. We are living that's history, and it's very, very, very important. And it's very, very important, I think, now also, that we get as many voices out there as possible, and we get all the different perspectives on what's happening, so that people can actually see, what's going on. And it's starting in West Africa, and it's going to just spread if we allow it to. That's what I feel anyway.
Yes, Linda, thank you so much. Linda, now going back, forward, having looked back to what we have covered in the last 1 year, now we are moving forward today with our topic, Unravelling African Geopolitics, Coups in Francophone and Sahelian countries. Today we are going to look at that, Linda. Of course, it's going to be a very interesting discussion, because, as you put it succinctly on your page, it's something that is on everyone's heart, and everyone is looking forward to hear about our take on what's happening in West Africa and, of course, the Sahel region. Linda, going straight into it, as we wait for our colleague Brian to get into this, I'm going to briefly give a little bit of a background onto this.
Please. Yes.
And just a bit about West Africa, and of course about the countries and conflict. Today, Linda, we are much more known for having more coups in West Africa than democratically elected presidents. We are more known to seeing people running away from their countries, of course, becoming refugees, because our countries are getting more and more unstable. And of course, we are prone to so many threats from governments beyond Africa. Of course,
exactly.
We have had threats, especially from the US and France, dictating terms for people in Africa. And to make it worse today, for people in Francophone Africa. We have had threats from presidents, from ministers, from secretaries, dictating how Africans should govern themselves.
Exactly.
Telling people who are asserting themselves, who are saying, look, we are tired of this kind of situation and we want to get new leadership, we want to see changes. And people outside Africa tell them it's wrong. Keep on going on with a regime that doesn't benefit you. As a result, we are seeing a defiance in West Africa and the Sahel region. We are seeing a defiance in Mali, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and all these other countries. And there are signals that we are going to see more and more coups in many of these countries. And it's going to spread like a sporadic fire and cover the rest of Africa, because it appears there is a silent revolution going on.
Exactly.
About people wanting to change their lives and be in charge of their own affairs. Of course, we have seen the Wagner Group, the Russians trying to influence how things go. I've been watching news and I've seen Russian flags going up in places that were under French support. I will not call it a colonization, but if you ask me, Linda, I would tell you that many of these countries that were under the French are not yet independent in so many ways,
sure,
especially in the economic sense of it. If you have a country where your currency is determined in France, where you have to keep your monies in France, where you have to pay a tax as known as the colonial tax in this century, Linda, it's embarrassing that we have a people, that we have a country, not one, not two, 14 countries under the occupation, economic occupation of the French government. And where they have conditions that have been meeting for the last 50 years, where a people cannot benefit from their own resources. So we are seeing revolutions. We are seeing coups. We are seeing what Kwame Nkrumah preached in the 1960s, where he was saying Africa must get free from all yokes of bondage and the revolution must take the grassroots. We are seeing what Sankara prophesied and what he tried to do in Burkina Faso. So we are seeing so many changes in these countries because people are poor. Linda, I want to give you a few statistics, facts, which I've done a quick research on about, especially about West Africa. Of course, we are 54 countries in Africa, but World Bank by 2013 gave an indication that Africa was the fastest growing economy in the world in 2013, and we are growing at the rate of 5.6%. Now, when you look at that was 10 years ago. When you look at that kind of pace we are now going behind the trend. There has been a shift, a backward shift. The way we were progressing very fast, now there is a halt. Why? Because there is no peace in many countries in Africa. Now, when you look at these bodies that were put in place, I will still talk about Sahel region because this is the focus of today's discussion. ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West Africa, was created on the 28th of May, 1975, and has 15 member countries with a cumulative GDP of 657 USD, as their GDP. Now, when you look at that, it's so meager for entire region to have only a USD 657, as the GDP. And now, when you look at the Saharan states, Saharan states, the community of Saharan states was created, and it has 28 member states with a cumulative GDP of US dollars 1,692. Now, that entire region, when you go to see their GDP, it's $1,692. Now, you can imagine people make a living in such environment. Now, this is Sahara region. This is West African region. I wanted to give a perspective about. I'm looking at the economy. I'm looking at the reasons why soldiers go against their presidents, against the so-called elected governments, and why the masses, the voters, the citizens join the soldiers to celebrate a takeover. Because before people blame these soldiers, before people put a blame on these soldiers, they must look at the community, they must look at the population, they must look at the economy and ask themselves, why do the citizens support the coupists?
Exactly. Quality of life.
Why do the citizens come on the streets and support the soldiers that are taking over these governments? It is because the governments in place are puppets.
Exactly.
And I've been saying the governments we have in much of Africa do not serve our interest, Linda.
No, I don't.
The governments we have in Africa are serving interests of companies, and more
exactly
so foreign-owned companies. They are serving a we call it corporatocracy. Mafia capitalism, as I call it. So,
and it's a fact, yeah.
When these companies are milking, are siphoning the resources from Africa, they're enriching company directors, they're enriching politicians in Africa, but the common man, the common woman, the children in Africa remain stagnant in poverty. Now, when the soldiers realize that there's going to be no change, they are taking over governments. And then we see foreign powers complaining when soldiers go on streets, when soldiers imprison presidents and take over. Linda, as a last shot, I'll give you this about Africa. That in 2018, World Bank report of 2018, which was made on world's regions by total wealth in USD trillions, revealed that Africa had only USD 2.6 trillion of the world's regional wealth by total wealth, and all other regions were doing far much better than Africa. We had a share of only 2.6 trillion billions, and we are the continent, we are the region that is ranked the lowest in the world. Yet, practically, me and you know that we have resources that contribute to 30% of the world's wealth.
Exactly, 33% they say, and they're probably underestimating because they don't want us to really know. It's probably a lot more than that. There's a lot we haven't discovered yet.
30% of the world's wealth is got from Africa.
Exactly.
But on the world's share, we are only sharing a pouted 2.6 trillion of that wealth. Now, these are the challenges, Linda, that are pushing people to revolt, that are pushing people to arrest their own presidents, that are making people in Africa go on the streets and say enough is enough. Because unemployment is at its highest, the health
everywhere
is sick and crippled. There is no hope in many lives of people in Africa. Linda, you have a better view of Africa because you are an African who have been there, who have been born there, who have gone to so many African countries. That is my brief analysis of what the economy of West Africa is, Linda. I hand back to you as we look at the present situation in West Africa. Back to you, Linda, now.
Yes, it's exactly true what you say. We have estimated 33% of the world's remaining non-renewable natural resources. Now, those are non-renewable. They take millions and millions of years to replenish. So once they're gone, they're gone. We have got everything here in Africa. I always say minerals, our mineral wealth is our biggest blessing and it's our biggest curse. It's a double-edged sword. The problem is that the majority of African people do not know the wealth that there is in their country. I mean, if we just look in recent years with Uganda, your country's oil discovery, I say to people, there's oil across our continent. Minerals don't grow according to national and borders. Our entire continent is the same age which means that all those minerals and that have all been forming at the same time. And minerals form in belts along, you know, that's how they, it's not to say that the oil is going to stop at Nigeria's border or the gold is going to stop at Ghana's border. It's everywhere, and there are so many of the semi-precious metals and all these new things that are needed for industry the world over that we don't even know about because we are kept suppressed in Africa. I mean,
Linda, again, your voice, you're off. We can't hear the sound, Linda. I think you have touched something. Please fix it, Linda. And as you fix it, Linda, I should add that our economies in Africa are more of Mickey Mouse economies. Linda, you went off at the voice couldn't be heard. And if you can speak again, I can be able to tell you that we do hear you, Linda. But for now, yes, these are some of the soldiers taking over countries in West Africa, and we are seeing a revolution that has been on for the last 10 years in many of these countries. People are saying enough is enough. That is Traore, the new kid on the block, taking over a government, the so-called elected government, and challenging the status quo. And we continue seeing these soldiers taking over. And this is not the first time they're doing it. Of course, we know that people like Sankara did so, and so many others have been doing the same kind of revolt and taking over. Soldiers all over the streets and people celebrating with them, saying, we need a new revolution, we need a new takeover. Linda, if your voice is back, if you can hear me, and would like to hear from you. Your submission was spot on.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, great. I was just talking about our mineral wealth and how so few people, our minerals should be central. We should be learning about them in our education system at school. We should be raising people and have university programs where people are aware of careers and things that they can go into. But we aren't, because we are obviously kept suppressed for a reason. I was just saying that we have so much mineral wealth. Minerals all take millions of years to form. Our continent is the same age, so there's oil across our continent. I believe massive underground gas reserves have recently been found in South Africa. Oil will be next. They're already drilling for oil wanting to drill off our coastlines of Southern Africa. And if you just look at all the things that have been discovered since our supposed independences that we never had in our countries before. Traditionally, it was, gold, and in Southern Africa, it was gold and copper and coal and that. And now there are all these other very precious minerals and things and metals and that industry the world over needs that we don't even know about. I mean, Sierra Leone is the biggest exporter of iron ore in the world. Most of the infrastructure in the world is built from iron ore from Sierra Leone. So if you just take that one country, that's just one example, and we look at the copper in Zambia, Africa is keeping the world moving. We are keeping industry going. We are keeping infrastructure going up. We are developing the rest of the world at our own expense. And our people are living like beggars, scratching in the dirt for whatever they can eat, literally, while our minerals are all being taken right off the continent. And now with these gas and oil pipelines that have been put through, I know in East Africa, and Buhari signed a deal with Nigeria, with the EU, they're basically just putting pipes into the ground and shipping them to the edge of the continent and off to Europe and that. And people are just so unaware of what's actually happening here, and that we are probably the wealthiest continent in the world. We're the second largest continent. I think Russia's the largest. And we know that we have got the most innovative, creative people from all walks of life here. We have really good leadership I'm not talking about in government, but I know from my life in Africa and having lived in different places and amongst different tribes and different regions of Africa, we absolutely have what it takes to be world leaders. And Nigeria, for me, is a very, very important country because not only with their natural resources, which aren't even tapped yet, but with the number of people and the history of West African people, and the fact that if you just look the world over at the Nigerians, it's Nigerians that are breaking records the world over in medical fields and in all sorts of fields. I honestly think that Nigeria is a world leading country, and Africa is a globally we should be right up there, but we're not, and we've been kept suppressed for a reason. We used to be the best in the world, but people don't even know that. So it's just very difficult to see what's happening now, and people just aren't aware. They're told that we're a poverty-stricken continent and that there's no hope and that this is what life is like and it's just Africa and that's just how it is, but it's not. Absolutely not. Kato, you've gone off now.
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Can you see me? Oh, okay, I can. Yes, and I'm just saying that's my biggest thing. We are not a poverty-stricken continent. We are not a continent. The African people are by no means stupid. They're all lazy or violent. This false narrative is projected onto us constantly. And my latest thing is they refer to us as third world. I reject that. We're not third world. What is third world anyway? We hear of first world. Do we ever hear of second world? Never. But we are third world. We are told we're third world.
Linda, to cut you just a little bit short there, I mean, that is part of the prejudices, Linda, which
exactly
I chose to exist. Linda, when I was studying the physics at the university, I challenged my teacher, who was an American trained professor, why Africa was being called a third world continent.
Really? Good for you.
Yet we had all it takes to live a fairer life when our people could feed themselves, when our people could treat themselves, when our people could handle the daily hassles on their own. I mean, we don't need to compare ourselves on specific parameters. If I cannot have an aeroplane, doesn't mean that I'm poor.
Exactly.
If I cannot have a Mercedes-Benz, it doesn't exactly mean that I'm the poorest child in the hood. I mean, the parameters World Bank and all these other economics used were racist in a way, Linda. You and me know many of us have grown in very comfortable homes in Africa without lacking much, which incidentally many children don't even get in other countries.
Sure, the family units for a start, the community.
Yes. The community, the love, the Ubuntu, the social fabric, the network that holds us together makes us a very rich people. Linda, I disagree with anyone that derogatory refers to Africa as a third world continent and our countries as third world, as first class, as this, because those are all decisive means to put people down. Back to you, Linda. Sorry, I had to.
No, I feel that's just my latest thing now is that I reject it and I refuse. Why must we accept being labeled something that we're not? Because our people believe it. And we don't even have a second world. They only ever talk about the first world. America is always held up as the shining example. And the third world. Now, you see, how can you tell me that the UK is first world? They've got no space. They've got terrible weather. Everyone is living on top of each other. They've got no place for farming or for just getting out. They've got no communities that have been there as a complete community, a family. People can live and not even know their neighbors. They just go home and close their doors at night. And half the year you are living in bitterly cold temperatures. And what can you plant? What can you grow in the UK? Nothing. There's no space. How on earth can someone in the UK say to me, this is what people have always said to me, why don't you, well, Africa's such a mess, this is people overseas, why don't you immigrate? Why don't you immigrate? I don't want to. I'm going to, why must I downgrade my life and go and live in a pokey little one-bedroom place in England where everybody can hear everything that's going on through the walls and get in on the train and go to work and back every day and work and back like a rat for this?
That's a beautiful, Linda, just adding a bit. Linda, the reason me and you began this platform was to empower our people, but also empower the world, because our platform is watched by people across the globe, Linda. And I'm happy we got in touch, and I'm happy we did this. We made this happen. We've made this possible. Linda, the stereotypes about people in Africa must be broken. Linda, the reason why an exodus of people hating their own backgrounds, hating their own skin color, is because others have made you think you are less. Linda, I'm happy that you are one person who has been encouraging people to see themselves, the good in themselves, to appreciate themselves, to raise their self-esteem. Because, Linda, what the system has done to the children in Africa is to lower their hope, is to lower their confidence, is to lower their self-worth, Linda. And when you say that, I agree with you. That's why in 1999, I was objecting to my economic professor, saying, you are wrong. You have got it wrong. You cannot tell me a person who gets my own food from my own garden, who doesn't buy food, who can treat myself, and you call me poor when I can survive even without much.
Exactly. And you've got no debt either. That, you know, most of us, it's cash, it's a cash society.
Yes, and I don't have a debt.
Exactly.
We so many years without debts at individual level. Debts in Africa have been gotten by our governments because they are greedy. Loans, of course, are being swindled by the very politicians. Linda, an average African person is a very contented person, as I've known them. Because we learned to master our environment and live and survive. So what we have done as a platform is to encourage people to believe in themselves. Let me give you a few statistics, Linda. By the end of 2022, Africa had over 1,400,000,000 people. If I read it correctly here, and in terms of population, we were second following Asia. In terms of population growth, we are following Asia, and by that, it means that we have enough, just enough resources in terms of human resource to make things happen. And apart from having land, when you look at the land segmentation in Africa, the land available for farming is much more than what we have so far utilized, Linda. If you look at your country, Zimbabwe, you are going to realize too much land going without being utilized. Linda, we have in Uganda, personally, I have land in Uganda I have not utilized, personally. I have not utilized. Linda, when you have all these resources, when you look at our population being the second biggest, only following Asia population, when you look at our total land area, which is 44%, which is only utilized by 44% of world's population, of Africa's population. Our land is only occupied by only 44% of our population. So, I mean, which means that the rest is left idle.
the rest is not utilized. Now, when you look at that, Linda, and all these statistics, and look at our regions, and you go into a breakdown of these regions, and you're going to find out that actually East Africa, where you have been part, where I come from, has the largest population in Africa, and of course, the most available land for agriculture. Linda, we have to break down these stereotypes by showing what they have and they are not utilizing. And as you said rightly, by pointing out issues to do with our weather. Linda, we are the only continent that I know that can grow food from January to December.
Exactly.
Now the question is
everything.
The question is, why should we be having people suffering from starvation and hunger?
There should not be a single hungry person in Africa. Our children should not even know what hunger feels like. We have so much abundance here.
We have so much abundance. In my new book, which I'll be giving you a copy soon, I'm talking about the abundance mentality, replacing our poverty scarcity mentality with an abundance mentality. Linda, we have so much abundance back home in Africa, but we cannot see it. We cannot simply see it. We have so much abundance, but we need to empower our people to think abundance instead of thinking scarcity. Linda, with all these resources we have, I was so much embarrassed to see Putin telling African leaders that is going to give. I was so embarrassed seeing Putin with his Russia telling African presidents that is going to give us food. We don't need that food because we can have that food. Why should Africa be reduced to begging for food when we can grow food 12 months throughout the year? We must address causes that make people not to grow food. And some of these causes are the wars that we are fighting in Africa, such that, as we have seen, only 44% of our land is being utilized. The rest of our land, which is arable, which is beautiful, which is fertile, is not being utilized. That's why in some parts of Africa, we don't have enough food. Not because the soils are bad, not because people are lazy, but because people are running away from their lives. The best part of northern Nigeria is under war, and the best part of Sahel region is under war. Now, who are the sponsors of these wars?
The West Africa at the moment.
Have these wars back in Africa? Who are the beneficiaries when people are fighting? Such that Putin can have the audacity to tell us that he's going to give us food. We don't want that food. To me,
exactly.
We don't want food from Putin. We want peace in Africa. Back to you, Linda.
It's like I always say, we are made out to be the begging bowl of the world, but we're not the begging bowl of the world. We are the breadbasket of the world with our minerals and, like you say, with our land for growing our own foods and livestock farming. African people are inherently farmers. If you grow up in Africa, you know how to grow vegetables, you know how to look after livestock. It is part and parcel of every person's life. It's not even a thing. It's just like you eat every day, you look after your crops every day, you look after your livestock every day. It's part of your whole family unit and your culture and everything. People naturally know how to grow crops. We have such an abundance, and I must say that from Southern Africa, when I first years ago flew into East Africa for the first time, just from the air, the difference in terrain, you've got that rich, reddish soil. It is just, in Tanzania, you could plant something and you could literally watch it growing before your eyes. You've got like double, triple the growth times of vegetables in East Africa, and your vegetables are so much bigger and so much tastier than in places where they've been grown in hydroponic tunnels and things. And it's not only our soil and our different temperatures. We've got our arid areas, we've got our high rainfall marshy areas for growing rice and that, and we've got our mountainous cold areas where we've got grapes and things that are growing, which are all under invasion of the Dutch Boers still, unfortunately, but in South Africa. But the thing is that we, not only that, but we've got the most abundant water sources. Look at all our natural lakes and rivers and waterfalls and water catchment areas. A lot of those are fenced off now in national parks. We've got game, we've got medicinal, all the natural medicinal herbs and things. I mean, even in East Africa still, mchicha, it's that green leafy vegetable in Tanzania. It's just a wild vegetable that you just pick and cook, and it forms part of the daily diet. We've got fish in all our oceans, and freshwater and saltwater, and it's just, we've got so much. But the problem is, and I likened this once to a child standing with his face against the glass window panes of a shop that's got the most beautiful food in it, meat, fruit, vegetables, everything you can imagine, like a restaurant. And he's standing at the door salivating, and he's hungry because he can't get in to get the food. That to me reminds me of Africa. We've got all the resources to do everything, but we are that little kid, that beggar, standing at the glass window with our faces pushed up, looking at this buffet of this banquet of food that we can't get, and we're hungry. That is what I feel like. Our hands are tied behind our backs, and we can't do that. I mean, the whole thing as well is that if we ever had...
So much, you get me started, as you always say, when you talk about Africa. Viewers, the intention of our talk is to inspire people back home in Africa to do better. That is the intention of our talk. We are not against anything, but we want to do better for ourselves. Linda, speaking of which, you know, being made the begging continent is so embarrassing, Linda. Linda, in all countries I have gone to in Europe, including the US, when you look at TV, what you see is a dying continent called Africa. What you see are children with dirty eyes, are children with big bellies because of malnutrition. What you see are war-ravaged zones. What you see are elderly people who are sickly. Linda, what NGOs have done, especially international NGOs, they have capitalized on only identifying the bad things that make them money.
Exactly.
And they get those photos, Linda. I could mention so many NGOs I've been watching here on tele, but I will spare them. But I'll tell them what they do to Africa, the bad image they give us. Because they want to raise money from their own citizens, they pick snapshots, they pick situations that are so alarming, even when they are the least in that area, and showcase them and magnify them so that they make the local British, for example, here, to look at Uganda as a dying country. Linda, it gets me bitter to see the bad publicity the televisions here show the people here. The bad publicity we are given as Africans. And it makes me shudder why they do this, and I know why. Because it pays the NGOs behind this retrogressive advertisement to earn them money out of sympathy. that we're a continent with nothing good. They are showing misery, they are showing anger, they are showing sad faces, they are showing children in dirty clothes. They will never show good images. Linda, I have grown in Africa. You were born in Africa. I was born there. I grew up in a very good life. And I was in a very good environment. I grew up seeing well-fed children. I grew up seeing happy children. I grew up seeing good families. But the image these people give to their people is of a dying continent, a continent in chaos. Linda, we need to change the narrative about Africa by showcasing what is good. For example, statistics again in terms of population. Linda, when you look at the following countries, Uganda, Niger, Equatorial Guinea are the 3 countries with the rising population in Africa. Our population as a continent, we are a young population.
Yes, now, we are the youngest.
Advantages of having a young population. Linda, I'm 45 right now. Now, me, I'm among the elders in Africa.
Exactly. If you make it to 60, you're on mosaic. Abisa, like, you really are. No, but it's true. It is. We are the youngest continent in the world. And what hope have our youth got? Because
our continent is a continent of young people. But there is an advantage of having a continent of young people, because young people are the future, because young people are the energy that drives workforce. You need young people to survive the epoch. You need people to move an economy forward. Linda, people look at that as a bad thing, that we have a very big population, that we have, but that is our strength. But only we need to realize how to use that strength. Linda, for example, I've been talking about the countries that are growing rapidly with a young population, Uganda, Niger, and Equatorial Guinea in the past 3 years, with a 3% increase per year in birth rate. Linda, our population is, of course, young, as I mentioned. And of course, when you look at Nigeria, the largest population in Africa is there with over 206 million people. Now, when you have that population, Linda, and you put it to work, you have all the ideas for you, because once you empower that population, there is no war. People are busy working. There will be market for your goods. Because Linda, we can have our own markets in Africa which are sufficient. But when you look at intra-trade within Africa, you'll be surprised to know that we do little trade within Africa. We
used to always do that before colonization. We used to trade amongst ourselves and across the world.
Yet, as you said rightly, before all this mess, we were trading within Africa more than without. We are trading more without, but what are we trading? We are giving away our raw materials, not even products, raw materials, because this is what benefits the cooperative, the company. Wants for raw materials. Linda, if we are packaging our coke and sell it to Europe, we'll be much more richer. If we were packaging our coffee and sell it as a finished product, we'll be much more richer. We'll be having jobs. Linda, all strategies in place are meant to keep a people poor.
Of course they are, yes. And look at all the made in China rubbish that floods our markets when we can make that stuff here ourselves.
Exactly. Because as I conclude on that, Linda, and then you take over, look at China, you have just mentioned it. With over 1 billion people, which we have as a continent, they have it as a country.
Yeah, exactly.
And someone will say, Africa is overpopulated. No, but China has our population as a country. But China is not poor. They have very person in China is living a far much better life than so many people in Europe. I've just given that as a yardstick because Chinese know the secrets behind success. They have their economy in their hands. They are in total control of their lives and their future. They are not wasting time on any other person's religions. They are not at war with anyone. Linda, we are at war with ourselves. And it embarrasses me. It embarrasses me to say it. So back to you, Linda. These are things that make me get worried. That in Africa, extreme poverty, as per last month, extreme poverty is at 43%. Poverty, Linda, amidst all that potential. Linda, these are things that are driving people into coups in Western Africa and Sahel region. Back to you, Linda.
No, exactly, Kato. And you talk about all the people who we've got an able, willing, healthy, fit, strong, innovative workforce. I always use the example of our refugee camps. Every single person in a refugee camp, and if you look at one like Kakuma, they've got, what, 200,000 people there. 200,000 workers are literally in a concentration camp and can't do anything. They can't farm, they can't run businesses, they can't trade, they cannot do anything. They are literally imprisoned. They are completely reliant on handouts from the United Nations or whichever camp is looking after them. And that is what is happening all over Africa, is that we are being made more and more reliant on aid. I get annoyed when people talk about famine, drought, and they, as you say, they show these photographs of people in Ethiopia and Sudan and that in these barren desert-like areas. Those people have been driven to those areas. That is not what those countries are like. Those countries are rich, fertile, lots of water. You can't say that Ethiopia and Sudan are down and out famine-stricken countries. We only ever see that on TV, exactly like you say. Those people are being displaced.
Linda, your mic is off. I think you are back now. Yeah. So you touch somewhere and then you get off. Yeah, you go ahead, Linda.
You hear me now?
Yes.
I think the cat maybe has been chewing these. So basically, I was just saying that we don't. So many people in our refugee camps. 200,000 people in Kakuma alone. Those people are trapped. They can't grow food. They can't farm livestock. They can't trade.
Linda, you are breaking your mic. Your mic has a problem. Linda, you are breaking. Linda, you are breaking, but as you break and you're getting back, Linda, we are sharing much about Africa today because we want to inspire people about Africa, but also to change the negative narrative about Africa, because we know that our channel is being followed by people across the globe. We want to tell everyone listening to us and viewing us tonight that the narrative about Africa must change, that people are branding us in the wrong way, Linda. And this is our concern, that we want to cause an awakeness about Africa so that people begin seeing Africa from a positive light. And people within Africa begin having self-esteem, begin valuing what they have, begin knowing where the problem is. If it is peace we want, and of course we want peace in Africa, because without peace we are nothing. And those companies, Linda, I always talk about companies, because from that argument, I know our problem are companies, not people in Western world. Our problem are multinational companies which connive with our stupid, greedy politicians, because they also have companies. So to me, Linda, it's capitalism gone wrong.
It is, yes.
has ruined all of us. That people are classifying us, that this is a first world person, this is a third world person, Linda. Yet we are all equal. Yet we are all human beings with equal opportunities and potential. But when you allow these companies, Linda, to come and dance in your compound, to come and dictate terms on how to trade, when you allow companies, and I call them companies, IMF, I call them companies, World Bank, I call them companies.
Oh yes, absolutely. They're all corrupt. United Nations as well.
Who call them organizations? As an economist, I call them companies, greedy, selfish companies, driving a few people. Linda, I should say that I am against our governments borrowing money.
Absolutely. We don't need to. We don't need to borrow money if our resources are managed properly.
2, because we don't need to. And because I know the science behind giving us these so-called loans. Because I know
want to take back.
National people are using advantage of us being to them and giving us conditions that are not favorable to us. Linda, I still believe that we have what it takes in Africa to do better. We have what it takes to harness our resources. We have fair trade. Linda, if you asked me, I would say Africa doesn't need loans from the Western government. Africans and Africa needs fair trade. We simply fair trade, to trade better, to be able to get what is worth from what we give to the rest of the world. That's why, Linda, going back to the main topic for today, which we shall continue with next week, looking at the coups in West Africa. Linda, what people are saying is we need fair trade. That's the summary of everything.
Exactly. And it's their right to demand that.
We are tired of French companies stealing from us for the last 60 or so years. But we are tired of French government dictating how our money must be controlled, how worth our economy is, our gas, our oil, our minerals. This is what the common people in West Africa, in Niger, are telling the French government. To me, that coup is against the French government and the companies, Linda. This is the message Africa is talking about. That we need fair trade. There is no way I can have uranium that supplies about 80% of France's uranium comes from one country, Niger. And
like
when people in darkness, when people in Nigeria are in darkness, when 80% of the uranium goes and makes people in France live a better life. So people are simply saying, look, it's not fair. We need better trade. Why should the gas pipeline be passing here and taking the gas to you when we're in darkness? We need me. That's the conclusion of the entire debate about this. The bottom line is fair trade for Africa. We want to trade with you. Let us do it in a fair way so that you don't take the line. Let the owners of the resources also benefit out of their own resources. Why should companies be able to enrich themselves when the people who sit on these resources back home are starving, are in darkness, don't have, when our resources are being polluted through mining? Look at Zimbabwe, look at Zambia, look at Malawi. I was doing
Ghana as well. Yeah.
I was doing a research last week and I was looking at the impact of mining in Malawi and Zambia, and I was the environment. It is hazardous. And the entire world looks on because what they want are the minerals from Africa without minding how and the impact of these minerals excavation to the people living there. Linda, to me, it's fair trade that is causing all these problems. And back to you, Linda.
Absolutely. And you see, can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
I'm sick and tired of the world's image being that African people are destructive and break everything and don't know how to look after things. They treat us like children. I mean, if I look at how much damage is being done in some of your forests in Uganda from illegal mining practices, where you've got a lot of wildlife and your gorillas and that. Even I was speaking to someone the other day in West Togoland, near Ghana, who also said that they see what the Chinese are doing there. They are polluting their water sources. There's deforestation going on. The people don't want that. They want to conserve their heritage for future generations. And they say, you know, but we are told that we had to have Europe, the West, come in here to tell us how to do nature conservation. I was doing research on a very, very old African city in Southern Africa recently, and I came across paperwork and aerial photographs and that had people go in there. We had such advanced systems of agriculture here in Africa hundreds and hundreds of years ago, where people were already making use of natural resources, capturing rainfall in, you know, big water catchment areas that they built in that. This is supposedly a primitive continent, and I'm just saying is that African people are not destructive, that people always say, and we've also got to stop believing that that Black people are like that. When you talk about the narrative that's going out on overseas TV, it's also the underlying constant racial bias in this entire world. It perpetuates the idea that Black people are not as good or are somehow different to other races, and that the white race is superior. Because, as you say, they sit in their first world homes with their indoor heating and everything, looking at photographs on TV of poor children with gummy eyes and flies, you know, drinking dirty water and that. I've even seen how they've done it here with things in South Africa, which is, you know, they take footage from another place or another time and they mix it. It's just, like you say, because of what we do with activism, all my writing is slamming governments and going on about all the terrible things that are going on, because I have to make people wake up. I do feel bad sometimes because I do the odd writing where I highlight the beauty of our continent and everything that we've got. I mean, I did a post recently on Sudan. Sudan is the most breathtakingly beautiful country in parts there, and its coastal areas as well. I think that is my fault as a writer too, is that I write too much negative and political stuff, and I need to start highlighting the really good parts of Africa. And people need to start believing that, for me as a white person and a white African, I try all the time to let people know. People in Europe think it's okay because it's Africa. I mean, if you look at the mass atrocities we have here, like in Nigeria, well, look at even just Uganda. If that had to happen in London or New York, it would make world headlines. You know, things that have been going on in all our countries. But because it's Africa, there is this fake belief that African people are somehow biologically different, so they don't feel hunger as much, pain as much, all those things. It is absolutely, I say to people, would you accept your children living like that? So why should you think it's okay just because trying to put through, and I do, is that every single race, we are all exactly the same. We feel the same, we hurt the same, we love the same. How on earth there is this, and I don't care what anybody tells me, it is a subconscious bias that white people have, that Black people are somehow, it's okay because they can handle it. It's what they used to. And it's not. It's absolutely not. And that just, I get this is why people are complacent and cast us as third world. And I'm telling white people, as a white person who's lived here my whole life, you are wrong. That is not, it is not acceptable that anybody in Africa has to live like this. I mean, look at the terrorism and everything going on, abducting of our children, FGM. This would never be allowed in Europe, but it's allowed in Africa because it's the Black race. It's okay to them. And it's such a false narrative. And unfortunately, the Black race, the majority, believe it or subconsciously think that they are somehow inferior. And that is my biggest message that I'm trying to get out, which is what I'm doing so much on trying to uncover the truth of our history so people can see what they came from, what they always were. And Kato, this is a very small period in Africa's timeline. Even if you take 500 or 1,000 years or 2,000 years, our people and our continent are millions of years old. We cannot define ourselves on everything that has happened to us since the 1700s, the 1200s. We are being defined by a few hundred years of our timeline as being the underdogs, and we're not. We never were. This that we're living in now is a very small portion of who we are as African people. Well, I'm white, but I'm a black person in white skin, so they found us born in the wrong body.
Linda, no, I agree with you. Body on the right continent, the right mind.
I think it happened for a reason. It happened for a reason.
You're in the right body, in the right continent, at the right time. And we need you. Linda, I told you that your presence in Africa and on this show highly motivates me. In fact, when you miss, I'm also down. If you realize, I rather say without Linda, I won't be able to function. But now the point is that what we're talking about in this episode today, as we open up our second year of operation, of course, we are going to continue with this very topic next Saturday, Linda. We are looking at Africa in general and look at issues that are putting us back. Which I'm going to give you a copy, which I'll be launching next week. But of course, Dennis is going to show the cover here. The book is called, the title is Think for Yourself and Do Good Better. That's the book, Linda. You're going to get a copy right today.
Wonderful.
And Do Good Better. That book is right now on Amazon, and I'm introducing it right on this.
Wow, that's fantastic, Kato.
Once you put in Kato Mukasa, you go to Amazon, you look at the books, you're going to see this lovely book, Think for Yourself and Do Good Better, the philosophy on how to deprogram yourself from a poverty wired mindset and rewrite it to an abundance. You know, this is it, Linda. In the book, I'm talking about parenting, I'm talking about mindset change, critical thinking, I'm talking about work, business, retirement, and all those important issues that can make an individual, wherever you are, empower yourself.
It's really
out of poverty, Linda. I don't care where you are, this book is for you. You are in America, you are in the UK, you are anywhere, you are in Africa, this book is for you because it's written from a well-researched point of view, but also a lived experience, Linda. That much of the time we are suffering because of our scarcity mindset, Linda. And this is the book I'm talking about. Linda, for example, look at it from this kind of point of view, that by the end of 2022, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is arguably the mineral richest country in the, and which is arguably #1 mineral rich country in the world. That country is in Africa, and that country is DRC Congo. But when you look at the statistics from World Bank, which I have before me right now, the Democratic Republic of Congo has over 80% of its population living below poverty line. But also, when you look at the poor people in the world, not in Africa, in the world, Congo or Congolese make 10% of the world's poor population. That when you have 100 people lined up all over the world, among the 100, 10 of them are Congolese. To make it easy to gossip. That when you get a poor person in the UK, in Netherlands, in whatever it is, China, everywhere, India, and you get 100 people in the room, 10% of those people will be Congolese. But why? When Congo is arguably the most resource-rich country in the world. That's one example.
And well, look what the lithium for mobile phones alone, every single person who owns a mobile phone has got a bit of Congo in there just about in the whole world. And you know, that yet the thing that every single person uses, but yet the Congolese have got nothing.
Yes. Linda, I have lots of research I've been researching for my book, which I'm now giving people briefly, but I'm going to end it here. Linda, when you look at, by the end of 2020 still, African country with the biggest population, but also equally very poor, yet mineral resource rich, were the following: Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, Congo, Tanzania, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Algeria, Sudan, Morocco, Angola, and Mozambique by World Bank ranking. These countries are ranked as very wealthy, very resource rich, mineral rich. The country I come from, Linda, is ranked by World Bank as one of the most resource rich countries in the world, but also is the highest poor population. Linda, as I conclude on this, Niger, or Niger as I sometimes call it, where we have a coup right now, where Traore has taken over, has the biggest percentage of its population under poverty. Over 80% can't earn simply $1 a day. But the uranium keeps France lighting. When people in Nigeria are living in total darkness, it goes back to answering the question, what is the problem? The problem is corporations. The problem is politicians in Africa who have a scarcity mentality that they want to steal everything from their population and enrich themselves and invest their wealth in Western capitals. And Western governments simply welcome them because they want their investments. Our thieves in Africa, our thieves as Museveni in Uganda, and many others in Africa, steal from Africans, invest elsewhere in the world. They go to China,
send all their kids overseas to school and that, yeah.
They go to Russia and invest. They go elsewhere and invest. Monies, blood money, stolen from poor people in Africa. And there is welcome to be invested elsewhere. Finally, when people like that die, the World Bank, IMF, doesn't take money back to the people. Their wealth remains in these countries. When Sesosoko Mobutu died, where did his wealth remain? We know where it is up today. So, Linda, these are the issues that are putting Africa in the bad state it is right now. And this is my last parting shot, Linda, that we're going to have another discussion on this next Saturday, and we continue now expounding more on the Sahel region.
Yes.
And of course, West Africa. Lena, back to you for your concluding shots. Me, I'm done on this for today.
Yes, we could talk for hours. I know we've kind of gone off topic, but we haven't really, because we can do a series as this unfolds, what's happening in West Africa. But I think by us giving our own experience from our own countries, we are also able to show people that don't know what's going on in West Africa. What Kato and I are giving you an idea here of what is happening in Africa and why we completely support these so-called military overthrows of governments and juntas and everything. It's revolutions that are taking place. It is the people the everyday people that are rising up against those in power and are taking a stand for their people and saying we've had enough. And you must understand that these things don't just happen. People have tried in these countries for years and years to try and rectify matters in peaceful ways, and their governments are just not helping them. What do you expect a person to do when they have reached the end of their tether? And I must say as well that this and many of the coups, not a single drop of blood has been shed with not a single violence has not broken out amongst the crowds and the people. It has all just been very peaceful. Everybody is resisting war. Even the Nigerians do not want to be sent in there. The military do not want to be sent in there. They say, how can you pit us against our brothers? We will never go to war against our brothers who are only fighting for a better life for themselves. That is how they've summed it up to me. And I think that is just phenomenal. It gives me goosebumps because it shows you that even with all the issues we have, when it comes down to it, we stand together. And we must know that these places we call countries and Nigeria, those are colonial creations. We are talking about our kingdoms of West Africa, that were all kingdoms that work together and were neighboring kingdoms that have been chopped up into these little countries now. And it's like the people from the Republic of Biafra said to me, these are our brothers. The people in Nigeria are our brothers. We were all one family. We will not fight against, and even in Southern Africa and East Africa, we all support them. Call it a military coup, call it what you like. Anthony Blinken and what's that, Biden and the whole lot of them, they do not have a right to dictate to us. We are not children. To stop treating Africa like it's a child and our people as if they're children and making decisions for us. How dare someone like Biden say that we must restore the democratic government? There are no democratic governments in Africa. We're not overthrowing democratic governments. We are overthrowing governments that are there illegally, that have rigged themselves into power with help from their people in the West. And I know we are fully in support of this. It's a fantastic thing. And we just hope that the countries keep on going. It's got a domino effect. And West Africa is, as you say, was crucial with the wealth and that we just, we as Africa are trying to hold our wealth back and to just say enough is enough with the killings and everything. We also know that America are financing a lot of terrorism on our continent, and that's a fact. There was, just to quickly say here, in 2002, when the war on terror started, there had been nine incidents of terrorism in West Africa. 9. Now there are 2,700 since then, since America has had a presence on our continent. It's a 30,000% increase, a 30,000% increase. Terrorism is being instigated and created by the West to cause more friction between our people, to displace more people, to kill more people so that they can get what they want. And that is the bottom line. That is honestly what is happening here. And I mean, we've got all the figures and facts and people, investigative journalists and people who have got evidence of what's going on here. And we are standing against it. We are taking a stand against the West. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
Thank you. That was very courageous way of putting things across, Linda. Tonight, I'm grateful. I have to pass on apologies from and make it because his gadget was stolen just a few days ago in Kenya, so he couldn't make it on the show, but we promise you that Brian will be part of this show next Saturday, and we shall continue with episode 2 of this very topic next Saturday. And Linda, unless you have anything you want to add, I'm grateful we had you today. Keep well, keep alive, keep going, and keep hope alive.
It's good to be back.
You can say bye-bye to everyone now.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week. And yeah, we'll follow on next week, see what happens this week, and we'll report on what's going on in West Africa for you same time next Saturday. Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank you.
Dennis. Thanks.
Then our moderator and our administrator has done a lot of hard work behind the scenes to make this one possible, and of course, is going to be uploading this very interaction on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye. Yes, bye.